Well, today I have some specific things that I want to talk about with regard to veterans and mental health. But before we get into the specifics, I'm curious if any of you has any general feeling about your experience in or with the military pertaining to mental health. Can you just speak generally to what you saw, what you experienced? How do you perceive the mental health situation with regard to folks in the military?
So as a spouse, I had the opportunity to be pretty involved with my community. My husband was an officer, and his unit deployed pretty frequently. And on those deployments, we would stay pretty connected to other spouses, and so that we could kind of provide that community and support to one another. But I did notice a big change when my spouse left the military. I think the real transition for him from military service into civilian life, and for all veterans that we knew, that's when I saw the biggest changes and the biggest, I guess, difficulties and disparities where mental health kind of came into play.
Yeah, I think when you're on active duty, you're more voluntold. So if you see something, like see something, say something, you have your brother to your left or right, or sister to your left or right. So they may notice something different, and your commanding officer, or whoever that leader may be, they kind of push you along. And next thing you know, you may have an appointment, to see, someone in behavioral health, what we call it, same as mental health. So the access was really good at that time.
Oh, yeah. That's good. We just did an episode recently about stigma surrounding seeking therapy, and it kind of makes me curious in this context. Did you sense that there was any sort of stigma, maybe when you were active military, in seeking out mental health services? Was it welcomed? Was it hush hush? How was that perceived?
Well, I'd like to address that if I could.
Yeah.
My second tour to Iraq was 2006, 2007, and I was out in Western Iraq, not too far from Fallujah, a little place called Ramadi.
Oh yeah, Ramadi.
Ramadi, yes. And I was a commander. I was a company commander in charge of a civil affairs unit there. The mindset that the active duty people had toward mental health was basically, at the start, it was, suck it up and deal with it. It didn't happen, and it didn't occur. There were combat stress team people there that you could go to, but no self-respecting officer was going to go there. However, I sent people there who had, some mental health issues of their own, and I remember, like wanting to go myself, but I felt that stigma until one day we were, every morning there would be this big, giant teleconference where the commanders would get on and they would talk about the nationwide situation in Iraq. And, you had to be at least like a 2-star to get on this thing. I remember listening to that thing one time, and General Petraeus came up on the line. And General Petraeus came up and basically said, combat stress is here. It's okay to go there. If you need to go there, I encourage you to do so. And I think that led to some, maybe the dam breaking, the stigma going away, where people could go and not feel as though they were being get the side eye from their superiors or something. But that was my experience with the second tour of Iraq. First tour, I did the invasion, 03, 04. I like to say I invaded Iraq with 150,000 of my best friends.
Wow.
The only mental health concerns we had was that we weren't able to sleep because we were so scared.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maggie, do you see much of a stigma in dealing with folks who are now out of the military, veterans? Do you feel that the stigma remains, or do you feel that veterans have embraced it?
I think it can go both ways. The population that I work with, I think there's a lot of awareness for the needs that they have in terms of mental health, as far as the other, health disparities that exist in the homeless population. But I think that the stigma still very much exists among veterans, that it's sort of just, they can get through it, this will pass. And you see headway being made, but I think the stigma still definitely exists.
Do you think that it has anything to do with a sense of like toughness that needs to be felt when you're out actually in combat? Does that come into play at all?
I think it does. Yes, I think certainly people think that it's just a matter of being tough and kind of getting through it. And I think that's probably one of the things that keeps veterans from utilizing the resources at the VA and outside of the VA. But, the population that I work with is pretty actively using services with the VA. So I do see a change is occurring.
In reference to the veterans basically not utilizing the VA or just passing by it because they feel that the people at the VA, some folks that, especially the ones I'm coming in contact, they feel those people are really sick. Those are really injured people. I'm not that injured, so I don't need to go there. So they're not utilizing the resources, which is very, interesting when, conversation with my own, fellow military members. What I normally see is that a decline in, maybe they lose their job or they having relationship issues. They're getting more 0 to 100 quickly, very irritable. And now you're having problems with your marriage, but really you need to see someone. These are when I think of it as when the invisible wounds become visible. And that's compartmentalized, those compartments, because in the military, we are accustomed to basically compartmentalizing everything. You got to keep going. Like you mentioned earlier, you're out there with all your buds, but really you can't sleep at night, but you need to compartmentalize and keep going. But what happens when those compartments start to unlock and come open? Yeah. And so you start seeing that. So I know with friends and then with folks that I talk with that were in the military, because I always try to connect with other veterans just to see, what is it like being out? What type of suggestions would you have, or what type of issues are you're experiencing?
How does that compartmentalization impact one's identity, especially as he or she transitions out of the military? Does it create identity crisis? How do folks manage that?
You manage it because if you're in a position of leadership, your focus is accomplishing the mission. You're giving the tools, you're giving the personnel, you're pointed toward the objective, and you move out and take that objective. And you do that day after day. Your personal life, it's in a compartment in the back of your mind. You don't think about it. So you compartmentalized and you just ignored whatever your fears were. You just did the mission. But the thing that really got me about compartmentalization is that when you're a reservist and you rotate out, okay, one day, literally, you are in combat.
Yes.
18 hours later, you're back in the United States.
Right.
One long plane flight, and you're back in the United States. 7 to 10 days later, you're back home. So when you are out processing and you're going through the physicals and they're asking you if you have any problems, you don't have any problems.
Better not say you have any
right.
problems.
Because you'll be stuck. You want to get out of there and go home. So that's something else you compartmentalize.
That's interesting.
My back hurts, but I'm not going to tell them. I'm seeing things, but I'm not going to tell them because I want to get out here and go home. Unfortunately, that may be some of what we see here at the veteran population. A lot of people just, kind of ignore that thing, put it in the back of their mind. Then they come back here and suddenly it jumps out of the box and says, let's deal with it.
You talk about people coming home with this, up there in a compartment, and they're out of active military duty. They're not interacting with, doctors or psychiatrists or psychologists there on site. What resources do they have when they come home for some therapy, some help?
Well, there is, and thank goodness there's always the Veterans Administration, and we poo-poo the VA and we say, it's the VA. And I share your concerns, like, you don't want to go in there because you think those are really injured people. When you drive up to the VA and you see these long lines of disabled parking spaces, you're seeing people that have really suffered. You go in there and you see people in wheelchairs and people on walkers, people with, Vietnam veteran baseball caps. You look at those guys and you think those guys are they paid the price.
Missing limbs.
They're missing limbs. Yeah, they paid for it in blood. I'm just in here because I have PTSD. I'm a wimp, and so you beat yourself up that way. But it's not. As I've gotten older, and I talk to people, I said, no, those like you said, those emotional wounds have to be dealt with. We can bury them all we want to, but they're going to come back and bite us at some point if we choose to continue to ignore them. So that's been in my experience. The VA has been very beneficial and very helpful for me.